I don't celebrate birthdays anymore. When you get older, you try to forget that they even exist. You really don't need a reminder telling you you're slowly becoming an outdated dinosaur. And I've always found commemorating the harrowing approach of your own death a rather morbid notion. So I suppose having my birthday in the middle of a nationwide lockdown was somewhat of a godsend. That didn't stop my mother from sending me a present though. She'd always found a way to annoy me, in the best way possible. And she'd outfiddle the devil himself just to put a smile on my face. I don't know how she did it, but this morning, when I went to let Dave, my cat, out, I nearly tripped over it. An anonymous brown package just laying there, inside my flat. How the hell did she pull that off? I chuckled internally, as I desperately tried to decipher what was scribbled on the front of the package. It was clearly in her handwriting. I'd recognize it anywhere. The worst effing handwriting you'll ever see. Like if you grabbed a crow, dipped its beak in ink, and let it peck randomly on the paper. To Jeffy, love Mum. I yelled to Dave to hurry his shit up, but he wasn't having it. So I just closed the door and brought the package with me inside, carefully placing it down on the kitchen counter. Mum was a next level prankster, so I made sure to investigate every inch of it, weighing it, gently shaking it, before finally opening it. I scratched my head in puzzlement. It wasn't much, just a DVD. No note or anything. My mum wasn't very technical, and I thought of her burning a DVD was quite frankly absurd. Did she even own a computer? Maybe Dad helped her out, or my brother. I guess there was ways she could have pulled it off, so I shrugged and plopped the thing into my laptop. After whirring discordantly for what felt like minutes, I was finally greeted with a single video file named Jeffy's Home, videos 86 to 90. I caught myself smiling sheepishly in the reflection on my screen. I didn't even know we had a video camera back then, so it was a very thoughtful surprise. Sort of an atypical gift from my mum, but I was still halfway expecting it all to be some elaborate prank. Maybe it was a Rickroll or something. But no, to my mild surprise, it seemed like a pretty extensive collection of genuine home videos from the 80s, complete with ridiculous low resolution, grainless horrible audio, and an abysmal cameraman. They seemed to be in the wrong order though, starting when I was 4, then younger and younger, which to me proved that it was my technically challenged mum who'd compiled them. I sat for about half an hour, enjoying every second of the shaky cam time travel, reliving moments I'd entirely forgotten, laughing at how weird everybody looked back then, and boggling at how I was still alive. I was a stupid, stupid kid, always falling over and running into things. I sent my mum a picture of me and my bottle of wine, relishing the ancient videos, with the caption, "Thanks for the home videos, Mum. Best birthday gift ever." But then it got strange. I'd just finished watching the summer of '87, when we apparently spent the holiday out by my grandpa's cabin by the sea. I was 2 years old then, and my brother Justin must have been 5. It was a wonderful trip down non-memory lane, since I had no recollection of it, and I was anxiously looking forward to videos from my first year. I didn't have any photos or anything from back then. My mum said they must have been misplaced when they moved a decade ago, but she could never seem to find them again. It was the summer of '86, according to the date in the bottom left corner. A shaky cam, more than likely manoeuvred by my dad. Looking over a tall white fence, a family of 3 was gathered on the other side. Husband, wife, and a tiny toddler. I didn't recognize any of them, but I suppose they must have been our neighbours. We moved every couple of years when I was a child, something about my mum's work, so it was an educated guess. There was some barely audible whispering as the camera was lowered, now facing the grass. I replayed this part several times, but I could never really hear what was said. Just fragments of it made sense. We, move, leave, hurry, were the only words I could make out. Then the camera was raised once again, peering over the top of the fence. The family was gathered out by the front porch of the house, the toddler with his assumed mother, and the assumed father operating a hose, spraying water on assorted flowers. Then the camera moved again, focusing on the cheery face of my mum. She was wearing a bright red sun hat, real cheesy looking, and the first time I saw it, I giggled uncontrollably. "Let's do it," she said, grinning widely. A chill ran down my spine. Those exact words have no meaning without context. Could point to absolutely anything. Let's do it. Let's go get ice cream. Let's do it. Let's drive down to the beach. Innocent things. Mundane snapshots. But the way she said it, and the expression on her face, I knew instantly something wasn't right. Moments later, the shaky cam got shakier, now running around the fence and into the backyard of the family. The cameraman, assumedly my dad, stopped at the gate, zooming in on the woman's face. She looked shocked, scared even, holding onto the toddler tightly and backing away towards the front door. Then my mum came into view again, and I realised why the woman appeared so frightened. I had to replay that moment several times too, because I could not believe it. Couldn't believe it was her. She was holding a knife, a huge butchery thing. She turned and grinned to the camera, waving the knife around playfully, before suddenly charging at the woman, her terrifying high-pitched screams echoing through my kitchen. I almost stumbled to the floor as I watched the carnage unfold. My mum stabbed the woman brutally in her left leg, causing her to collapse on the front porch, the toddler rolling down onto the grass, wailing hysterically. The assumed father suddenly became aware of what was happening, and his eyes widened as he yelled something, running to the woman's aid, only to be stabbed in the neck by Mom as he came within arm's reach. The next 2 or 3 minutes were dedicated to my mum stabbing the two of them repeatedly. The fleshy, pulpy, mangled remains at the end of it, hardly even human in appearance anymore, absolutely drenched in blood. My mum turned to the camera, laughing manically. She suddenly noticed the wailing toddler in the grass, and quickly wiped clean the knife with the inside of her dress. Placing it down on the porch, she then gently lifted the toddler, hugging him tightly, smearing blood all over the child. "We'll name you Jeffy," she said, and kissed him. Me, on the cheek, before waving to the camera. I slammed the laptop shut and staggered back, hyperventilating uncontrollably. No, it couldn't be. It had to be some kind of prank, right? Right? Some unbelievably elaborate prank. You could do that these days, Fabricate shit like that, right? Deepfake and everything. My phone vibrated. A text from my mum. I read it. Then again, once more. I grabbed the laptop and got the hell out of there. "I didn't send you any videos, but your father is coming over to sort it out. Stay where you are, Jeffy. Everything will be alright. Don't move. We'll be right there." Addiction took our mother slowly, rocked her through it, and sung her to sleep deep into the mattress on her bed. When her back teeth fell out, she left them on the side of the bathtub. I was 7, and I kept them in a matchbox. The missing pieces of her kept safe, so she wouldn't be lost forever. So maybe one day we could put her back together. Our house fell down around us, and we tried our best to raise ourselves. The ceilings had water damage, and the bottom stairs had dry rot, and in the winters the radiators would bleed rust. But it was still our house, and Annie made it a home. My sister Annie mothered me, with lopsided band-aids on bruised knees and a lukewarm microwave meal. She told me ghost stories, and I didn't mind when I crawled into her bed later on, too scared to sleep alone. She taught me to dance, barefoot on the living room carpet, music channel on full volume on the TV, shaking our hips before they were fully grown. She always lets me shower first so the water is hot, never complaining when she had to make do with the cold. She brushed my hair every day before school, even when I screamed and hit her when she caught the tangles. Annie was dark-haired like her father, whoever he had been, but I was blonde. Annie was desperate to be blonde too, like Marilyn Monroe, like Mum. I think she thought it would make them closer, remind Mum less of her dad. I'd give anything for her to have her hands in my hair one more time, even if it hurt. She moved to New York when I turned 18 and never came back. I still dream about her sometimes. Keeping up with our mother was impossible, and we learnt from a young age we would always be left behind. It didn't make it any easier. When she was drinking light, she shone, would wake up at 3 a.m. with pancakes dripping in cherry syrup. Sometimes when the weather was right and she'd had enough being drunk alone, she would call our school up and tell them we had both come down with summer sickness and we'd drive to the beach instead. I remember being 9 years old in the backseat of the car coming home after one of our ocean days, sucking the salt from my fingers. Annie had just dyed her hair blonde, her best friend Jane helping her bend over our kitchen sink. From behind, I couldn't tell who was mother and who was daughter. Radio up and windows down, blowing the sky inside. When she was drinking heavy, she'd be out all night, hair piled up like a beauty queen, eyes glazed over and ringed with a glitter and black. Sometimes she'd be gone a day or two. She would never tell us when. One day we'd just wake up to an empty house and the fridge packed full. Post-it note on the front with a smear of Mum's lipstick in the outline of a kiss, telling us she'd be back soon. Sometimes she'd bring guys home, filling the table with beer cans and ashtrays, smoke up to the ceiling, Mum lost in the haze. We'd sleep with pillows over our heads, trying to drown out the music they would blast until the AM, and wake up to the strangers at our kitchen table in the morning, asking us where we kept the coffee. When Mum drank too little, she fell apart. She wouldn't buy food, refrigerator a gaping hole in the wall. She'd chain smoke, leaving cigarette burns on the wallpaper up by the stairs, like the walls were sick and decaying. She barely slept, walking around with blue half-moons under her eyes, knuckles raw. She would scream at the slightest thing. I remember once when I spilled a glass of juice on the couch, she looked over at me with dead eyes and dragged me off onto the carpet, and then took every single cushion off the couch and into the backyard and set them on fire. Annie went to watch a while from the window, and then sat next to me on the floor, backs pressed against the skeleton of the seats, head resting in the crater of my collarbones. When Mum drank too much was the worst. She'd laugh too loud and too long at anything and everything, until her mouth started to shake and she started crying at the breakfast table into her cereal. Annie shut down when Mum was like this, when somewhere deep inside herself, where nobody could hurt her, she'd stay up until the morning watching old black and white movies on the TV, whispering the lines she knew by heart like prayers. When I was 5, I'd cry when I'd find Mum passed out cold on her bed, sure she would never wake up. Annie would wipe my tears, tell me she was only sleeping, just like the princess in my storybook. We'd sit on Mum's bed together and wait for her to wake up. When we were older, I was the one who would pick Mum up off the bathroom floor again, and Annie would put her to bed, smoothing her hair off of her face and the vomit from her mouth, changing her clothes if she pissed herself. Watching them then, there was no doubt that Annie was the mother now. It was October, and I was 13, Annie 16. It was a Wednesday night, and Mum had been gone for 2 days. She called us that morning from a payphone, voice slurring down the line, telling us she was having the best time with all her new friends, hoped we were doing fine. When she asked me if I was having a good birthday, I hung up on her. My birthday had been the day before. Annie had given me a pile of presents, strawberry lip gloss and glittery nail polishes. I didn't ask where she'd got the money from. I didn't care. We'd taken the bus to the beach with Jane, eaten the birthday cake she'd made for me, sand getting into the frosting. It tasted like sweetness and the sea, and I savoured every bite and scrape of sugar against my teeth. We watched the sun go down, Annie snapping grainy photos on her shitty Nokia as I blew out my candles, wishing over and over that Mum wouldn't come home, that she'd stay gone this time. But that Wednesday night, me and Annie weren't speaking. Anger hung heavy between us, seeping through the floorboards. It began when she tripped at the bottom of the stairs. We'd both laughed, Annie throwing her head back, a gap between her front teeth catching the light. When I'd bent to pick her up, I'd caught my breath, warm against the freckles on my cheeks. I let go of her arms and she fell again, hitting the floor and grinning, shaking her hair from her face, Her breath was heavy with whiskey. I couldn't start picking her up too. Couldn't watch her fall again and again. Just like Mum, I knew she'd never get back up. I stared down at her, blonde hair falling into her eyes, and all I could see was our mother. And then I was running, feet slamming the hallway like heartbeats turned loose. I'd run for the kitchen and tipped every bottle we had down the sink, shoving Annie back as she fought to stop me, catching liquor on her fingers as it fell. She grabbed my shoulders and made me drop the very last bottle. It smashed between us on the floor, glass shards shining like we'd dragged the stars out of the sky and broken them, pieces we could never put back. Outside through the open windows, the sky turned pale gold, clouds a mess of pink and cream smeared across the horizon. I cried then, watching Annie on her knees picking up the pieces. That was Annie, always trying to fix things, even when it was too late. The smell of food dragged me from my room, stomach turning traitor inside my rib cage. Annie was cooking pasta, real food, not made in the microwave. She'd set the table, Tammy Wynte singing softly from the CD player, Annie gently swaying her hips as she stirred the tomato sauce, rich and warm. As we ate in silence, with every bite, I forgave her. Mum never cooked dinner, or remembered my favourite was spaghetti ever since I was a kid, or stayed sober long enough to sit up at the table. Annie wasn't Mum. We were washing the dishes when we first heard it. A moth was crawling down the inside of the pane, and I cracked the window to let it out into the dark. From the backyard came a faint sound. I tilted my head to listen, as it was coming from far off. Crying. I figured it was Mika, the 2-year-old next door, having a tantrum loud enough for us to catch. Or maybe even Lucky Strike, the cat that junkies down the street, begging for food like he sometimes did. I always wanted to feed him when he came around, winding over my ankles, but Annie always stopped me, saying once you started giving, they never stopped taking. Looking back, I don't think she was talking about the cat. Annie flipped the Christmas lights strung up around the porch, and we sat on the plastic beach chairs watching the skies. When we were little, we'd sit outside, and Annie would tell me the names of all the constellations, and the stories of how they came up to be hung up in the night sky. I had to grow up before I realised she made them all up as she went along. It was a game we still like to play now, making up ridiculous stories for the shapes we could pick out. Ah yes, that one there is Core's light. It got there when God dropped it out of his convertible window and never picked it up, she said, nodding sagely and hiding her smile. Of course, I said, waving my hands and pointing past the power lines. Right next to the ashtray left there by Angels on a Smoke Break. Yeah, they say if you wish on it, all your dreams will come true, said Annie, grinning. She stopped laughing, voice quieter, face tilted up at those dead stars. Let's wish Emmy. Let's wish. So we did. The sound of crying interrupted us. It was closer this time, and definitely human. We turned to each other, confused. Annie shrugged, and I squinted out into the black. It sounded like a baby, lost, tired and alone. It must be Mika, I said, slowly getting to my feet. Maybe he walked around the back. Shit. Do you want to call Connie and tell her we'll bring him over? Annie didn't reply, and I sighed, rolling my eyes. Guess I'll do everything then. I stepped off the porch, grass soft against my heels. The air smelled like it might rain, fresh and clean and growing. A promise unfulfilled. Annie's voice was strained. I turned to her, smiling. It died on my face when I saw the look on her own. Get inside now. She was staring out into the dark, past me, opening the door with one hand behind her, fingers fumbling on the catch. I froze, barefoot in the dirt. I'd found what she was looking at. In the bushes, by the back fence, was a person, crouched with their knees tucked up neat under their chin, arms wrapped around their legs. Their mouth hung wide, softly opening and closing as he cried. Like a child lost in the dark. Not like a child, but someone pretending, mimicking the sound open and closed out in the blackness. Suddenly they straightened, snapping upright, face still hidden by the black. They were tall and thin, too thin to be a normal person. Panic made me move, animal instincts left over from the days we lived up in the trees carrying me forward. I was faster than Annie, dragging her inside and slamming the door behind us, hearing it bounce on its hinges as I locked it. We watched as the person slowly walked towards the house, steps deliberate and long. Annie reached for my hand, holding me tight, and turned me to face her, holding my shoulders. Don't turn around, Emmy. Do not turn around. Instinctively, I started to look over my shoulder, out into the darkness. Annie grabbed my face hard and shook her head. I knew then she was serious. Her voice cracked, and she cleared her throat, gripping my hand tight enough to hurt, nails digging in, grounding herself. I looked down at our fingers interlocked, both of us grown from the same bones. I'm going to call the cops, and everything is going to be... Her voice faltered, stuttering. Tears spilled over her lashes, dripping like the promises of rain. Annie never cried. Your phone's on the porch, she whispered, and bile crawled its way up to my throat. Her phone was upstairs, charging. A soft tap-tap-tapping filled the silence. Annie turned to the window, eye white showing her eyes were so wide. It was the sound of someone's forehead against the glass, slowly, over and over. They started to speed up, faster and harder, skin meeting glass until they were slamming into the window hard enough to shake the panes. The tapping stopped, and I was about to ask Annie if I could now look when she screamed, followed by the sound of cracking glass and the loudest slam yet. Whoever was in our yard had just smashed their face hard enough into the window to break it. We ran upstairs, 2 at a time, skipping the ones that caved in with dry rot on instinct. I turned behind me once, and Annie yanked my face back before I could see. The sound of broken glass echoed behind us as we made it to the bathroom, locking the door. A thin, wailing cry, like a baby calling for its mother, filled the hallway, trapped between the walls and the locked doors. Annie threw her back against the door, feet jammed up against the bathtub, clutching the knife she had grabbed from the kitchen. I did the same, shoulder to shoulder. Slow footsteps started on the stairs, deliberate and casual. The crying had become mocking, almost laughter. Shrill bursts of sound, then giggles, high-pitched and abruptly stopping before starting again. The first door on the upstairs floor was my bedroom, and we heard the distinct sound of it slamming open. They were looking for us. What is going on? I asked Annie, not even bothering to brush away the tears that I couldn't stop falling. I watched my sister pick herself up off the floor and brace her hands on the door as we heard the sound of a second door slamming open. Mom's room. The next room on the hallway was the bathroom. Annie pulled me to my feet and handed me the knife. I shook my head and pushed it back to her, terrified of what would happen if I had to use it. Annie shoved me and pressed the knife into my hands, thumbs pressing hard enough on the blade to bleed. I watched my sister's blood drip down her wrist, a winding red road, still pushing into my hands despite the pain. I took the knife. Something slammed against the wall that Mum's room shared with the bathroom. A high-pitched wail followed. I held my breath, could feel my heart beat in the base of my throat, a wild and frantic thing. I'm going to get the phone from my room. I shook my head violently, about to argue. Annie clamped a hand over my mouth. I could taste the blood on her hand, salty and sweet, like birthday cake by the ocean. Yes, I'm going to get the phone, and I'm going to call the cops, and we're going to be okay. I shook my head again. It's the only way. When I go, I need you to lock the door, and you don't open it for anything or anyone. Not for me, not for anyone. Promise me. I shook my head, and Annie pressed her hand into my mouth, crushing my teeth against my lips so it made my eyes water. Yes, promise me, Em. Something smashed in the room next door. Annie brushed the hair off my face, gently tucking it behind my ear. Promise, she mouthed, and unlocked the door as slowly as possible. bolt was scraping gently. I watched the curve of her shoulder disappear into the black hall outside, like the moon in eclipse. And then she was gone. I couldn't move or breathe for a second, and then I slammed the bolt shut just as something bounced off the outside of the door. A high-pitched scream followed, handle rattling up and down hard enough to pop one of the screws. I watched it roll towards me on the tiles, and then silence. I sat with my back to the door, holding the knife and wishing I was holding Annie's hand instead. Still silence. Nothing but me and my lungs slowly filling the room with my breath. "Em," came a voice to the door. I started, hands gripping the knife. "Honey, what's going on?" "Mom?" My voice cracked. "Mama, is that you?" I wrapped my arms around myself, shaking, trying to keep myself still. "Sweetie, it's okay, just open the door." "It's okay, just let me in." The handle rattled again, gentler. "Just let me in, it's all okay." She banged on the door, and I took my hand off the bolt. "Honey, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I missed your birthday. I'm sorry I'm such a terrible mother. Please." Her voice broke, and she started to cry. "Just let me in, baby. I'm so sorry." I screwed my eyes shut. She sounded so sad and so lost. I just wanted her to hold me, like when I was a kid, and I'd come off in the swings with a scraped knee. Maybe this time she meant it. Maybe it would all be okay. My hand found its way to the bolt again. My sister's voice came through the door, warm and gentle. "Yeah, Emily, let us in. It's all okay." My hand froze on the bolt, and I tightened my grip on the knife. Annie never called me by my full name. A head banged on the door, handle rattling. "Emily, let us in." Annie's voice became low and guttural, followed by the same shrill giggles from before. Mum spoke now, pleading and crying, voice getting louder and louder. "Let us in, let us in," over and over again, punctuated by her fist on the door. I thought about demons and monsters, all the bedtime stories we pray don't crawl out from under the bed. "That's not my sister, and you're not my mother." I screamed through the door, hand over my head. I climbed into the bathtub and curled into a ball, cradling myself, knife clutched into my chest. I didn't know what was outside the door, but I knew it wasn't Annie. It wasn't the voice that yelled when I changed TV channels, the one that sang me happy birthday, the one that told me I was smart even when I got bad grades, the one that read me stories about princesses that never wake up. It wasn't human. Bangs and yells came from downstairs, followed by the footsteps of people running. A low guttural howl ripped through the house, filling the room until I felt like I was drowning in the sound, and then the door was kicked in. I screamed, covering my eyes, waiting to die. Arms found me and lifted me from the tub, carrying me from the room. I looked to the outside of the door as I was carried downstairs. It was covered in long, scraping claw marks, dragged down to the floor. Pillars ripped apart covered the hallway in soft down, like it had snowed inside. I watched them drift slowly as men in uniforms checked each of the rooms that looked like they had been torn apart by something feral. Outside in our driveway were police cars and an ambulance. In the middle of it all was Annie, bathed in blue and red lights as it washed over her. Lit up in the dark like a neon angel, face aglow. I threw myself from the cop's shoulder and ran to her, holding us both together, broken pieces and all, standing under all these constellations we made up. Gentle screaming came from the ambulance, which rocked occasionally. Annie gently turned my head away, smiling so sadly it made my chest ache as I understood. Turns out there was no demon, no wild animal or bad men trying to break in. Just Mum, out of her mind on booze and drugs and everything in between, coming to the end of a week-long binge. Something had finally broken inside her head, and this time we couldn't put her back together, no matter how hard we tried. Sometimes you fall one last time, and you never get back up. Annie had seen her in the garden, blood dribbling from her mouth, track marks bulging on her forearms like unmapped roads, rail thin and desperate for one more hit, one more fix. She'd searched the kitchen for all the drink I'd thrown away, and when she hadn't found it, had come to hunt for the stash she hid in the bathroom. She hadn't wanted me, just the drugs on the other side of the door, so high she could mimic Annie's voice almost perfectly. Turns out, the real monsters are the ones that want to eat you alive slowly. The kind that come in a bottle, or a needle, or at the end of a long list of reasons why you can't get out of bed in the morning. Sometimes the monsters are the ones that raise you, or love you the most. But it's up to you, if you let them in. During quarantine, my 4-year-old and I played a lot of hide and seek. Well, hide and seek with a few extra rules. The first, I'm the only one that hides. The second, I have to call out "yoo-hoo" every few minutes, otherwise he'd never find me. And the third, when he gets close, I pop a hand or foot out of my hiding spot and he shrieks, "I see your feet!" 4-year-olds are really stupid, okay? And I didn't exactly have the money to buy him a ton of toys. We'd just moved into this house a few weeks ago. The rent took up nearly my entire paycheck. I'd gotten all the furniture from the recycle. We ate beans and rice often, and I was still driving around a 20-year-old car. "Hide again," Benjamin said, tugging my hand. "Hide again." "But it's almost bedtime." "Please." "Okay, but only one game. Go count in the kitchen." He ran around the corner as fast as he could. 1, 2, I ran through the living room, and then I saw it. The hall closet. Perfect. I opened the door and ducked inside. It was a tight fit, all those scratchy, furry old coats pressing against me, but it was worth it, because the better hiding spot, the more time I got to myself. I pulled out my phone and started browsing Reddit. Soon his muffled footsteps sounded around the dining room. I waited a minute. When he didn't seem to be coming my way, I cracked the door. "Yoo-hoo," I called out. Footsteps grew louder. I heard his muffled giggles as he walked towards me, and then he started going up the stairs. Was an idiot. I cracked the door open a little further, just in time to see his little feet disappear from the landing. Then I shrugged. More time to me. I sat back down in the closet and pulled out the phone. "Mummy," I heard him giggle from upstairs. "Mummy, where are you?" I smiled. I wonder if a mum invented hide and seek. It's quite brilliant. You get a few precious minutes away from your child, and they're not even supposed to make much noise, but you're entertaining them at the same time. Absolutely brilliant. But then, after a brief moment of silence, I heard a "yoo-hoo." I stopped. Every muscle in my body froze, but I heard it, clear as day, a soft, clear voice calling from upstairs. But Benjamin and I were home alone. Oh God, someone's in the house. And Benjamin. I burst out of the closet. "Benjamin, where are you?" I heard Benjamin's footsteps running above me. His giggle was trailing down to me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. "Benjamin!" I finally screamed. More giggles, and then Benjamin's voice. "I see your feet." "No!" I catapulted up the steps, screaming for him. I burst into his bedroom, but he wasn't there. Just his empty rocket bed, comforter rumpled, embroidered stars staring back at me. I ran back into the hallway, spinning around. "Benjamin?" But I didn't hear any footsteps, any giggling. The house was dead silent now, and I could hear a pin drop. I ran into the guest bedroom. It was empty. I ran over to the closet, threw it open, looked up and down. Nothing. Stumbling back out of the hallway, I crossed back towards my bedroom, the only bedroom left. I ran inside and flicked on the light. Empty. The pile of dirty laundry on the chair, untouched. The wardrobe hanging open, my clothes inside. The pillows piled up on each other in a heap, heart dropping. I ran around the other side of the bed, also empty. I crouched to look under the bed. Empty. "Mummy? Mummy?" Relief flooded me as I heard that voice. The door to the bathroom opened a crack, and one blue eye peered out at me, wide with fear. I ran over and grabbed him, hugged him, and then I hoisted him up and started out of the bathroom. His eyes were still wide with fear, and they weren't focused on my face, but the spot just over my shoulder. I whipped around. It took me a moment to see it, but then I did. I stared at the wardrobe, frozen, my heart pounding in my ears. In the shadows, poking out from underneath the hems of my dresses and coats, were 2 feet. In moments like this, the brain doesn't really think. It's too slow. Instinct reigns. The smartest thing would have been to lock ourselves in the bathroom and climb out the window. But instead, I just ran for the hallway, as fast as I could. As I ran down the stairs, I heard the weighted footsteps, slow and methodical, resonating through the house. I could still hear them pounding into my brain as I ran into the neighbour and screamed for help. The police came. They searched the house. They didn't find anything. No signs of forced entry either. So they promised me they'd patrol my street for the next few days. That was really all they could do. I decided to stay at a friend's house for a few weeks, until I felt safe again. But every time I closed my eyes, I could see them, those 2 feet that looked so off. Swollen, as if waterlogged, a bit too greyish in tone to belong to any normal person, toenails blackened and split. And I think back to that wardrobe, how I'd gotten it for free, how the owner told me his mother had just died, and he was just trying to get rid of all her stuff as quickly as possible. And I wondered, how exactly did she die?